The coffee in the kitchen was still steaming when Marco DeLuca vanished from the Willow Glen neighborhood in San Jose, a community of more than 1,200 residents. That August morning began with a thin layer of mist covering the porches and pale sunlight streaming along Glen Eyrie Avenue. At 8:32 a.m., Marco's neighbor, Mrs. Linda Farrow, saw him step out of the house holding a folded note in his hand, walking along the narrow pathway separating the two adjacent homes. Marco was on his way to his usual newsstand to buy the morning paper, a habit he had maintained for many years. Mrs. Farrow watched him from her kitchen window, seeing his light gray jacket gradually blend into the early sunlight. As he turned past the hedge, that was the last image she saw. What happened in the next 18 minutes would ensure that Willow Glen would never sleep peacefully again. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In August 2005, the Willow Glen area of San Jose was immersed in the characteristic Silicon Valley summer atmosphere. Quiet streets, shaded by elm trees, rows of red-tiled roof houses packed closely together, and the steady rhythm of a community accustomed to stability. At a Mediterranean-style villa on Glen Eyrie Avenue, Marco DeLuca, 48, a well-known fashion designer in the local art scene, began a morning like any other. Marco lived with his partner Adrian Cruz and ran a small design studio at Santana Row, where he usually went in the morning to check his schedule and meet with the creative team. His daily routine was almost fixed, leaving the house around 8:30, stopping by the newsstand on Lincoln Avenue to buy magazines and coffee, then heading to the studio before 9 o'clock. That morning, around 8:32, Marco locked the door, crossed the brick pathway, and left the house in his familiar attire, carrying an otherwise unremarkable morning. One neighbor, standing in the front yard watering plants, confirmed seeing Marco walking along the sidewalk as usual, heading toward the center of Willow Glen. But unlike normal, Marco did not show up at the newsstand, and by nearly 9 o'clock, studio staff had not seen him enter the office as scheduled. Adrian called Marco at 9:15, but the phone rang with no answer. By 9:47, a second call also went unanswered. Subsequent calls around 10 o'clock and 10:30 continued to meet silence. By 11 o'clock, Adrian began calling people Marco typically met in the morning to check if he had changed his schedule or encountered a personal issue, but no one had seen him all morning. Marco's lack of contact, failure to appear, and absence of any message ran completely counter to his disciplined habits, causing Adrian to shift from worry to the clear realization that something was wrong. At 11:20, with all calls still going unanswered, and every familiar location for Marco yielding no trace, Adrian understood this was no longer a normal delay. The mounting unease throughout the morning finally overcame hesitation, and he picked up the phone to call 911, reporting to the San Jose police that Marco DeLuca had disappeared under inexplicable circumstances. The call was received at 11:21 a.m. at the San Jose Police Department's dispatch center, and was quickly classified as a missing adult case with unusual factors, due to the victim not carrying personal items and vanishing from his familiar routine. Less than 10 minutes later, a patrol unit along with the initial responding investigator was dispatched to the villa on Glen Eyrie Avenue. Upon arrival, they noted no signs of forced entry, the front door still locked, and no evidence of disturbance inside. Adrian provided police with all basic information about Marco: age, occupation, health status, daily habits, routine schedule, and especially emphasized his near absolute discipline, a factor that made hours of no contact highly unusual. Police asked Adrian to recount the morning precisely. When Marco woke up, when he prepared to leave, what he was wearing, his usual route, and the places he planned to stop. Based on the porch camera, police confirmed Marco exited the door at 8:32 a.m., heading south and disappearing from view after a few seconds, establishing the last seen timestamp at the house itself, 8:32 a.m. on August 12, 2005. After completing the statement collection and gathering background information, Police conducted a rapid risk assessment per 2005 guidelines to determine the case's priority level. Marco was an adult with a stable routine, no signs of intent to leave, no luggage or personal vehicle taken, and no history suggesting voluntary disappearance. This chain of factors led dispatch to rule out voluntary departure and classify the case as missing suspicious circumstances, meaning missing under suspicious conditions, but without sufficient basis to confirm criminal elements yet. On that basis, the investigator requested Adrian provide a list of people Marco had contacted in the prior 24 hours, while quickly checking his usual morning locations to outline an initial activity radius. Assuming Marco was traveling on foot per his daily habit, police established a priority survey radius of approximately 300 meters from the house door on Glen Eyrie Avenue, encompassing the route to Lincoln Avenue and familiar intersections. This area was marked as the first deployment zone, and shortly after, on-the-ground survey operations were activated. Less than an hour after the radius was set, the SJPD investigation team began canvassing the neighborhood around Glen Eyrie Avenue by door-to-door approach. Teams walked designated routes, knocking on doors to gather information from local residents, using the same procedure, confirming whether they had seen Marco that morning, noticed any strangers, unusual sounds, or noteworthy movements between 8 o'clock and 9 a.m. Households with doorbell cameras or civilian recording systems were asked to assist with data extraction. Since most 2005 devices had low resolution and limited storage, police technicians directly connected to copy data before it could be overwritten. Out of more than 20 homes surveyed, 4 had cameras capturing portions of Marco's usual route. All data was temporarily sealed and transferred to a mobile unit for processing. Simultaneously, another team visited businesses along Lincoln Avenue, including the newsstand Marco frequented, a coffee shop, and an electronics store, to collect commercial camera footage. The newsstand owner provided front door footage from 8 o'clock to 9 a.m., confirming Marco did not enter that morning. The coffee shop had an awning-mounted camera recording pedestrian movement at a distance. Police collected all this video, as the angle toward the intersection could help identify anyone present during the relevant time frame. To supplement vehicle data, the survey team coordinated with UPS and USPS delivery services in the area, requesting logs of delivery vehicles that passed through Willow Glen between 8 o'clock, 9 a.m. The companies supplied vehicle lists, stop times, and responsible delivery personnel. Police cross-checked this to rule out involvement by delivery vehicles or drivers. Another part of the survey focused on identifying unfamiliar vehicles during the time window. Police recorded vehicle types, colors, and directions if cameras captured any vehicle lingering unusually or appearing in positions inconsistent with normal neighborhood traffic. All collected data was brought to a temporary staging point in the investigation vehicle, where an assigned investigator compiled a composite map. This map included multiple layers, locations of homes with cameras, camera recording times, Marco's likely travel routes based on daily habits, and key intersections with commercial cameras. Investigators used the neighborhood map to mark each camera source, creating a spatial temporal chain showing covered areas and camera gaps, thereby identifying points Marco might have passed through without being recorded. Locations with curves, large bushes, or gaps between houses were marked in red, indicating blind spots. A separate table listed interviewed residents, numbered by household, noting whether they had cameras, saw anyone suspicious, or heard unusual sounds. By the end of the first field survey, the investigation team noted that no witness had directly seen Marco after 8:32 a.m., and there were no reports of unusual behavior or disturbances in the area. Nevertheless, gathering multiple camera sources from homes and businesses allowed police to reconstruct a real-time observation framework of the neighborhood that morning. The camera layout map, combined with Marco's possible routes, clearly revealed 2 key points, segments with relatively complete coverage and image gaps, places where events could have unfolded outside observation. When on-site search within the temporary radius yielded no new leads, the investigation team decided to shift focus from space to time to continue narrowing information gaps. From that decision, the phase of reconstructing the 48 hours prior to Marco's disappearance was activated, aiming to identify all of his final activities and pinpoint any destinations or contacts that could prove pivotal. Investigators began by collecting data from Marco's personal calendar, including work schedules on the studio computer, notes in his planner, most recent sent and received emails, and saved phone messages. Adrian was asked to grant access to Marco's personal computer and email accounts, allowing police to retrieve the full sequence of schedules and communications in the 2 days immediately before his disappearance. The list showed Marco had an internal meeting on the afternoon of August 10th regarding plans for a new collection, a brief meeting with a fabric supplier at Santana Row on the morning of August 11th, and an idea sketching session with the design team late that afternoon. No formal appointments were scheduled for the morning of August 12th, beyond his daily habit of stopping at the newsstand before the studio. From bank data, police verified Marco's transactions in the prior 48 hours, noting a coffee purchase at 9:07 a.m. on August 11th at a familiar spot in the studio area, a fabric purchase at a partner store the same day, and no transactions after the evening of August 11th. This aligned with Adrian's statement that Marco rarely carried much cash and usually used his card. The investigation team continued reviewing cameras from locations Marco visited in the prior 48 hours, including Santana Row, the route from the studio to home, and the area where the fabric supplier was located. Camera footage from the fabric store confirmed Marco's presence there around 10 o'clock a.m. on August 11th, leaving about 20 minutes later. No signs of anyone following or approaching him in that area. From the appointment list and obtained camera footage, police established Marco's precise movements throughout August 11th and 2 periods on August 10th, with full verification data. The remaining task was to determine any stops Marco might have made on the evening of August 11th or early morning of August 12th if his schedule had changed, but with his personal vehicle still at home and no new card transactions, police concluded Marco most likely did not leave the house that night before disappearing. A list of people with closest contact to Marco in the prior 48 hours was compiled: 3 design team members at the studio, 1 fabric supplier, a UPS delivery person who came to the house on the afternoon of August 11th, and 2 regular clients who visited the studio during work hours. The investigation team contacted and background checked each person in turn, verifying their locations during Marco's disappearance window and flagging those not present in the relevant area. This data showed no emergence of suspicious individuals or anyone with direct conflict with Marco in his final 2 days. However, while reconstructing the timeline, police identified a significant time gap on the evening of August 11th, from approximately 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., a period with no recorded online activity, communications, or transactions from Marco. Adrian stated that Marco often spent evenings working privately in his sketching room or reading professional materials and did not always detail his end-of-day activities, so this gap was not immediately deemed abnormal, but was still flagged for further checking to rule out possibilities. Another gap appeared on the morning of August 12th, between Marco leaving home at 8:32 a.m. and when he should have reached the newsstand around 8:45 a.m. Cameras in the newsstand area captured no entry by him at any time, while home cameras only recorded his departure from the porch. The entire walking route from home to the newsstand under normal conditions took only 10 to 12 minutes, so the gap from 8:32 to 8:50, when intersection cameras recorded heavy pedestrian traffic, became a priority segment for cross-referencing with neighborhood survey data. The investigation team marked these 2 empty time periods as focal points for the next analysis step, as they represented moments where Marco's presence was confirmed by neither camera nor witness. After completing the 48-hour pre-disappearance timeline reconstruction, police finalized a detailed timeline table, marking verified points in green, unverified in yellow, and empty in red. This timeline table became the primary basis for continuing the investigation into route analysis, activity radius, and possibilities that Marco may have encountered an incident during unrecorded time frames. Based on the timeline table and Marco's usual route map, the investigation team launched the first on-site search operation with support from the San Jose Police Department's K-9 tracking unit. Scent samples were taken from Marco's clothing in the bedroom and given to 2 working dogs to begin trailing. The starting point was set at the porch, matching the last seen timestamp of 8:32 a.m., and the K-9 team began moving along Marco's habitual route toward Lincoln Avenue. In the initial phase, the scent was stable and clear, but near the intersection with Pine Avenue, one of the 2 dogs began slowing, showing signs of disorientation. After about 20 meters from the intersection, both dogs exhibited the same reaction. The scent trail abruptly ended. Police cordoned off this area as the point of scent loss and marked an expanded radius of about 50 meters around the intersection for detailed search. From there, search forces were divided into small teams to comb the entire surrounding area. Sidewalks on both sides, bushes along pathways, access ways to the nearest houses, and the edge of Willow Street Park, located only a few hundred meters from the scent loss point. Teams moved in sweeping patterns, using high-powered flashlights, despite daylight, to probe dark corners under bushes or narrow gaps between fences. Simultaneously, another team expanded to the parking lot behind a row of small shops, an area close enough for a pedestrian to be forced off course. In this parking lot, located east of the scent loss area, the search team discovered a small metal object near the curb edge, largely obscured by the shadow of a truck. Upon approach, an investigator confirmed it was a silver necklace with an intricate twisted strand design, matching Adrian's description of the necklace Marco wore daily. The necklace location was marked with a small evidence stake, and the surrounding area was immediately secured to prevent contamination. On-site investigators promptly documented the recovery, recording precise GPS coordinates, taking overall and close-up photographs of the evidence per standard procedure, and using specialized gloves to place the necklace into a sealed evidence bag. Recovery time was logged in the report, 2:27 p.m., nearly 6 hours after Marco left home. After the evidence was collected, the investigation team expanded the search radius another 300 meters around the parking lot, including small alleys behind, connecting walkways between house rows and dumpster areas of the shops. They searched every square meter of ground, looking for footprints, drag marks, disturbed soil, or any physical traces that could prove Marco had been present. Some trash items were collected for review, but nothing clearly linked to Marco. The K-9 team was brought back to the parking lot area to check if the scent reappeared there, but both dogs failed to pick up a clear signal, suggesting Marco may not have moved through this point voluntarily, and that the trace arrived here possibly due to an object drop during forced redirection. When the first search operation concluded, the team leader compiled all results into an on-site report, clearly noting the K-9 scent loss point, Marco's possible directions of travel, the location of the silver necklace discovery, and areas searched without additional leads. This report marked the first step in which the investigation obtained a concrete piece of evidence, while also clarifying that on-site traces had reached their limit and required deeper specialized analysis to advance the process. Right that same afternoon, the silver necklace, the only piece of evidence recovered during the first search phase, was sealed and immediately transferred to the San Jose Police Department's SJPD Forensic Science Laboratory, accompanied by the crime scene report and all photographs taken at the recovery location. There, the forensic technicians followed the 2005 Standard Evidence Processing Protocol, starting with an examination of the object's surface condition to determine the potential for latent fingerprints or skin contact impressions. They used fluorescent powder and blue-violet alternate light source to search for possible ridge detail, but the necklace's surface was quite small, curved, and featured numerous intricate twisted patterns, making it extremely difficult for intact fingerprints to adhere. Some surface areas showed faint curved impressions and partial ridge edges, but the clarity was far too low to be entered into the AFIS system available at that time. The technician recorded this as latent prints, insufficient clarity for identification, and photographed all potentially relevant surface areas for later analysis and archiving. Next, they collected soil samples adhering to the clasp area and along the two twisted grooves of the necklace to determine soil type or possible geographic origin. Using 2005-era analytical equipment, the soil was only evaluated at a basic compositional level, color comparison, sand, silt, clay ratio, and presence of distinctive mineral grains. The results indicated soil composition typical of urban San Jose, lacking any specific markers that could pinpoint a particular location. This was documented in the report as soil composition non-specific, meaning the soil sample could not be used to identify places Marco may have passed through. Continuing the assessment of wear and damage, the technicians concluded that the necklace showed no signs of forceful pulling or heavy impact that would cause deformation. The clasp remained intact, and the twisted joints were not stretched. This suggested the necklace either fell off due to a light impact or was pulled off in a manner that did not apply twisting force. All evidence condition data was entered into the electronic case file and cross-checked against the crime scene report to ensure consistency. While the forensic team processed the physical evidence, a separate investigative unit reviewed all available camera footage obtained during the initial neighborhood and commercial area survey. Residential cameras along Glen Eyrie Avenue and Pine Avenue were reviewed chronologically, with special focus on the 8:30 to 9 a.m. window. A camera from a residence near the Pine Avenue intersection, where the K9 team lost the scent, did not capture Marco passing by, indicating he may have turned earlier or been redirected before reaching the camera's field of view. Footage from a newsstand on Lincoln Avenue was examined closely. Marco did not appear during the expected time frame. However, a camera at a coffee shop across from the newsstand captured distant pedestrian and vehicular movement, and at approximately 8:41 a.m., one frame recorded the shadow of a man walking behind an individual whose build roughly matched Marco's. The distance between the two was about 40 to 60 feet. The image was too blurry to identify facial features or clothing details clearly, but the movement pattern and direction aligned with Marco's usual route. The investigative team flagged this unidentified individual's appearance in the camera compilation log, noting the exact timestamp, camera location, direction of travel, and image clarity level. Other commercial area cameras did not clearly capture Marco, but did record vehicle traffic volumes entering and exiting the area during the relevant time window, allowing police to compile a list of vehicles for later cross-referencing. All relevant video segments were clipped, time-coded, and archived for further analysis. Once preliminary processing of both camera footage and physical evidence was complete, the investigative team consolidated the information into the first comprehensive data summary table, which included the last confirmed sighting location of Marco, the time the K9 lost the trail, the necklace recovery location, camera capture of an unidentified person following behind the victim, Marco's typical route under normal conditions, camera coverage gaps, and a list of vehicles and individuals present in the area during the relevant time. This table was designed to help identify missing links between the 8:32 a.m. timestamp and the moment the necklace appeared in the parking lot. Although it did not yet point to a clear investigative direction, correlating the evidence with camera data allowed police to outline a plausible movement sequence and begin defining priority areas for expanded search in the next phase. Based on the preliminary data table compiled after the first round of evidence and camera analysis, the investigative team shifted to the second search operation, aimed at verifying the plausible movement path of Marco inferred from the shadow figure's position and the necklace's location in the parking lot. From the blurry coffee shop camera image, police determined that both Marco and the unidentified individual were moving south-southeast, deviating from Marco's usual route to the newsstand. This opened the hypothesis that Marco had departed from his familiar path, either voluntarily or due to external redirection, at a point not covered by cameras. The team remarked the map, identifying intersecting routes within the area between the scent loss point and the parking lot, while incorporating terrain data to evaluate locations conducive to forced redirection, including narrow alleys between buildings, dead-end streets that could lead to the parking lot via shortcuts, and blind spots where a pedestrian from the main route could be intercepted without residential cameras capturing it. A dedicated area investigation team was assigned to conduct detailed surveys of every alley within a 1-2 kilometers radius from the scent loss point, measuring pathway widths, degrees of concealment, morning pedestrian traffic, and recording entry-exit points to the parking lot behind the commercial row, where the necklace was found. Concurrently, the tactical mapping team used on-scene GPS data and camera diagrams to reconstruct potential routes Marco could have taken if he continued walking in the direction indicated by the camera, including secondary roads connecting Pine Avenue to the eastern commercial area, and small streets leading directly into the residential area behind, where the parking lot was easily accessible from multiple directions. As the search radius expanded, the team proceeded in concentric sweeps, first checking pedestrian pathways, then public structures such as parking garages, rear waste areas behind buildings, and shortcuts linking main roads to residential zones. Each location was visually inspected, illuminated with high-power flashlights, and probed with surface detection tools for signs of impact or foreign objects. Additionally, a roadway inspection team was tasked with documenting possible overlooked traces such as scratches, drag marks, or small dropped items missed in the first search. During the expanded sweep, police simultaneously cross-referenced the area's traffic schematic to identify particularly advantageous intersection points, locations where a suspect could approach with a vehicle without lingering, exploiting blind corners or camera-free zones. However, after many hours of intensive coverage across the full 1-2 kilometers radius from the necklace location, the search team found no additional evidence or traces directly linked to Marco. No discarded clothing, documents, personal items, or anything indicative that Marco had traversed the expanded routes was recovered. The Willow Street Park area, east of the parking lot, was also thoroughly checked for signs of struggle or unusual movement on the grass. All results were negative. The absence of new evidence prompted the investigative team to revisit the camera data and map to assess the possibility that Marco had been removed from the area during a camera coverage gap. The inference diagram was accordingly revised. The route from Glen Eyrie Avenue to the scent loss point was designated Phase 1. The area from the scent loss point to the parking lot was Phase 2. And the 1-2 kilometers radius around the parking lot was designated Phase 3. These three phases were assigned differing confidence levels based on collected data. Phase 1 had camera and witness corroboration. Phase 2 had physical evidence and the unidentified shadow figure. Phase 3 yielded no new traces. Based on the results of the second search, the investigative team concluded that the only current piece of evidence, the necklace, served as a critical transition point between the camera-documented portion of Marco's route and the segment where he may have been redirected. Although no further leads emerged, finalizing the inference diagram enabled police to precisely identify the area most likely to contain overlooked information and reinforce the hypothesis that the key events occurred within a brief time-space window between Marco's departure from his usual route and the moment the necklace fell in the parking lot. After completing the inference diagram and determining that physical routes no longer yielded new data, the investigative team shifted focus to analyzing Marco's social relationships and individuals who had interacted with him in the 30 days prior to his disappearance. The objective was to determine whether any person had motive, opportunity, or unusual behavior potentially connected to his vanishing. First, police compiled a comprehensive list of everyone who had direct contact with Marco in the preceding month. Drawn from work schedules, email correspondence, call logs, studio client lists, material suppliers, Marco's employees, close friends, and regular studio visitors. The initial list exceeded 30 individuals, but only about 18 had significant interaction levels. The team divided the list into three categories: work-related, personal, and incidental contacts. They then filtered for potentially relevant individuals by evaluating frequency of contact during the month, degree of closeness, each person's geographic location around the time of Marco's disappearance, and any recorded unusual behavior from prior interviews or electronic data. Studio employees were ruled out from the initial suspect pool because all were present at work on the morning of August 12th, had mutual alibis, and studio cameras confirmed none left the premises during the critical time frame. Suppliers also lacked standout candidates. The primary supplier confirmed no contact with Marco after a delivery on the morning of August 11th and had GPS evidence placing their delivery vehicle elsewhere on the morning of August 12th. Close friends were re-interviewed, but none displayed signs of recent conflict or tension with Marco. When examining the incidental contact group, investigators noted a few unfamiliar customers who had visited the studio 2 weeks earlier, but none were in the Willow Glen area on the morning of the disappearance. However, while reviewing Marco's email contacts from the prior 30 days, police identified a noteworthy item, a short series of casual emails between Marco and an individual named Andrew Cantera, whom Marco had met at a design exhibition over a year earlier. Andrew was not part of Marco's close friends or colleagues, but his unexpected recent email appearance prompted the team to add him to the interview list. Continuing the review of Marco's phone data, police discovered a missed call from Andrew's number on August 9th, 3 days before the disappearance. Even though Adrian stated Marco rarely maintained contact with non-industry acquaintances near project deadlines. Public location records showed Andrew had been in San Jose during the same week as Marco's disappearance, so Andrew was elevated to the secondary suspect tier, individuals without close ties, but present at the critical time and place. In the initial interview, Andrew stated he had come to San Jose to visit a friend and stopped by Marco's studio on the spur of the moment to discuss an old collaboration idea. But his phrasing regarding his exact timing in the city was vague. When asked about his activities on the morning of August 12th, Andrew said he was staying at a motel on Monterey Road, walked to a nearby diner, and returned to his room around 9 a.m. But he provided no receipts or verifiable location proof. Investigators checked motel records and confirmed Andrew had checked in on August 11th, but checkout time and his morning departure were unclear because the motel lacked hallway cameras. Another detail that drew attention was Andrew's visible tension when questioned about his morning movements, and his stated departure time from the motel did not align with front desk staff's internal notes. However, the inconsistencies in his statement were not yet sufficient for detention, as police lacked physical evidence or camera footage placing Andrew in Willow Glen at the precise time of Marco's disappearance. Investigators documented all contradictions, evasive behavioral cues, and the history of interaction between Andrew and Marco in the case file, but per protocol, Andrew was classified as a person of interest without arrest or formal conclusion. Ultimately, the team completed a risk assessment matrix for each listed individual. 15 were cleared, 2 required additional verification, but no direct link, and Andrew Cantera was prominently flagged for continued monitoring in the next phase. After completing the suspect screening and recording the inconsistencies in Andrew Cantera's statement, the investigative team returned to an overall evaluation of all collected data to date and recognized that pedestrian routes had ceased yielding new leads, while the necklace's discovery in the parking lot behind the commercial row strongly suggested Marco had been redirected and removed from the area by motor vehicle. Based on this hypothesis, police decided to redirect the search focus to routes a perpetrator could have used to transport the victim by car in the short window after Marco left home. The terrain analysis team identified 3 primary routes, the first along Lincoln Avenue toward Kirtner Avenue, the second along Pine Avenue leading to the main eastern thoroughfare, and the third, a small direct connector from the parking lot area to the entrance of Guadalupe River Park, an expansive area with numerous trails and several vehicle-accessible locations. Based on the camera map and coverage gaps, these 3 routes became the focus of the third search operation. First, police deployed personnel along Lincoln Avenue, sweeping sidewalks, intersections, commercial access points, and short-term parking zones within the corridor that could be used for a brief stop. They searched for tire marks, dropped items, or roadway disturbances, but found no indications related to Marco. Next, another team swept the entire Pine Avenue corridor, the link between the scent loss point and the eastern residential area. This route featured several narrow intersections suitable for a vehicle to pause unnoticed. However, after hours of combined inspection of trash bins, enclosed lots, and blind corners along the route, no new evidence or traces were recovered. When the first two routes produced no data, the team concentrated on the third route, leading to Guadalupe River Park. The park featured an extensive trail network along the river, dense tree cover in many sections, and several spots accessible by truck or passenger vehicle. The complex terrain required a multidisciplinary approach. Police mobilized a water search team to probe the riverbed and deeper water sections using small boat sonar equipment. Simultaneously, shore teams methodically checked every trail segment for signs of struggle, footprints, anomalous objects, or any indication someone had entered the area between the morning and noon of August 12. Scene technicians also examined commonly used temporary parking spots in the park, locations where vehicles could stop with minimal attention. However, as with other areas, no evidence linked to Marco was found, no new physical details, no relevant tire impressions, and no personal items surfaced. The water team concluded operations with negative results, noting that the current flow lacked the force to carry away large objects, and no suspicious items were detected on the river bottom in the scanned sections. Shore teams finished inspecting all vehicle-accessible trails, but likewise found no anomalies. After sweeping the three main directions a perpetrator could have used to remove Marco from the area, police compiled the results into an overall assessment report. The report stated, "No supplemental evidence, no indication the victim continued walking beyond the scent loss point, and no sign Marco was taken to the park or water area after the necklace was dropped in the parking lot." This reinforced the conclusion that the critical events occurred within a very short time-space interval between the two established timestamps, and that any vehicular movement, if it occurred, was rapid and left no clear traces. The investigative team noted that the third search had covered most reasonable transit routes possible if the victim had been forced into a vehicle, but the lack of traces clarified that they needed to shift investigative focus to other directions in order to continue breaking through remaining blind spots in the disappearance case. When the third search phase ended without yielding any new traces or evidence, the investigative team was forced to revisit all data collected throughout the three search stages to reassess the feasibility of each hypothesis. But the results showed that every direction led to a dead end. No witness saw Marco after he left home at 8:32. No camera captured him appearing at the locations he was supposed to go. No additional physical evidence emerged beyond the necklace found in the parking lot, and that location provided no further information about his subsequent direction of travel. The technology available in 2005 was insufficient to process the faint fingerprint, could not extract clear images from low-resolution cameras, and there were no sufficiently detailed mobile signal tracking systems to pinpoint Marco's location during the time he went missing. These technological limitations caused on-scene analysis methods and route inference to lack any solid foundation. In internal meetings, the team re-examined each group of previously interviewed persons of interest, including Andrew Cantara, the only one with some inconsistencies in his statements. But because there was no camera footage, physical evidence, or witness confirming Andrew's presence in Willow Glen on the morning of August 12, the police could not pursue any additional detention or summons measures. Andrew's tracking file showed that he left California by the end of 2005 and later moved to Oregon, but an individual leaving the state alone was not sufficient to constitute evidence of flight or involvement in the disappearance. With so little evidence, the police could not construct a complete criminal hypothesis, and the nature of the case, no body, no new evidence, no clear leads, caused the investigation to gradually stall. By early 2006, the team's monthly reports all concluded there had been no significant progress. Efforts to re-review the entire regional camera system in the subsequent period also produced no different results. Camera data was overwritten on a cycle, eliminating the possibility of retrieving additional information. Letters sent to the community requesting information from residents received no useful responses. Underwater search teams, forest checks, and additional terrain sweeps created no breakthroughs. By the end of 2006, SJPD conducted a full case reevaluation and concluded that the investigation had reached the limit of the methods available at the time, with no further evidence to pursue or expand upon based on the data obtained. The official closure report was prepared according to department procedure, stating, "No new witnesses, no new physical evidence, no expanded technical data, and the victim's subsequent path could not be determined." Per regulations, the case was transferred to the cold case unit in early 2007, along with all evidence, including the necklace, route maps, camera data, interview transcripts, and the process suspect list. The file was archived in long-term evidence storage under case number #058,074, with the status unsolved, insufficient evidence. Upon transfer, the investigative team noted that Andrew no longer resided at his previous San Jose address, and according to DMV records, he had updated his address to Oregon, with no signs of legal violations or behavior that would allow police to hold him for further investigation. With no legal grounds to continue monitoring him, and no evidence directly linking him to the disappearance, police were forced to close the investigative angle related to this subject. All data was sealed according to the two-tier storage protocol, physical evidence placed in temperature-controlled preservation storage, and paper files archived in the cold case repository. By mid-2007, Marco DeLuca's disappearance was officially classified as an unsolved case, with investigation suspended until new evidence or technology emerged that could reopen the inquiry. In 2023, after SJPD launched a program to review unsolved missing persons cases per new California state directives aimed at leveraging modern analytical technology, case #058,074 of Marco DeLuca was transferred to the cold case unit for reassessment of reopening potential. The file, consisting of more than 2,000 pages of reports, route maps, printed camera data from the old system, and all sealed evidence from 2005, was assigned to investigator Haley Nguyen, one of the unit's members specializing in dormant cases with strong potential for resolution through forensic advances. After receiving the file, Haley spent many days reading the entire 2005-2007 investigative reports, reviewing every detail chronologically to understand the steps taken, directions explored, and bottlenecks that caused the case to stall. She re-examined interview transcripts from each individual, paying special attention to inconsistent or incomplete answers due to lack of supporting data. Haley flagged key sections in the scene reports, focusing on three main points: the K9 loss of scent location at the intersection, the necklace discovery spot in the parking lot, and the single camera frame capturing a figure walking behind Marco. She also reviewed the original witness list, including residents interviewed in 2005, and confirmed that no one provided direct information about seeing Marco after the 8:32 timestamp. Most witnesses only confirmed the absence of unusual signs, and reports noted that no one heard shouts or observed any conflict in the area. Haley noted that early-phase witnesses were never re-interviewed after evidence was found, a gap in the original investigative chain. Regarding physical evidence, Haley reviewed the chain of custody records and 2005 forensic reports. The silver necklace contained only faint fingerprints of insufficient quality for the AFIS system at the time. Soil samples on the necklace could not be clearly sourced. Low-resolution camera footage could not be enlarged to identify the person behind Marco, and no DNA analysis was performed because no biological traces were collected. When comparing these limitations to 2023 forensic capabilities, Haley immediately saw multiple opportunities for reanalysis. Current machine learning fingerprint recovery algorithms can reconstruct faint ridges that old technology could not process. Micromineral soil analysis can yield more detailed geographic information, and security camera image enhancement software can clarify footage enough to identify basic characteristics of the figure in the old video. She noted each point in a list of critical forensic items to be reprocessed. Haley also reviewed the suspect evaluation section, where Andrew Cantera was flagged for inconsistent statements but lacked sufficient legal grounds for retention. She reread Andrew's full interview transcripts, cross-checked timelines, and noted that the time Andrew claimed to have left the motel on the morning of August 12 was not independently verified. However, the lack of hallway camera data and limitations in phone location pinpointing prevented 2005 investigators from going further. Haley viewed this as an item to recheck, but first prioritized forensic items because they offered the potential to open entirely new investigative directions. Continuing the review, Haley flagged elements not re-examined during the stalled period, including gaps in Marco's timeline and camera unmonitored routes. The only confirmed physical data timestamps were Marco leaving home and the necklace appearing. The rest was a void that 2023 technology could narrow by reanalyzing cameras. Haley compiled a list of video segments for recovery, including the coffee shop camera, residential cameras facing Pine Avenue, and the camera opposite the newsstand, with the goal of clarifying the image of the person walking behind Marco. After completing the review, Haley created a consolidated list of items requiring modern technology processing, recovering faint fingerprints on the necklace using enhanced fingerprint resolution systems, analyzing soil samples with micromineralogy equipment to map geographic origin, restoring and enhancing low-resolution video to identify subject characteristics, recontacting witnesses by determining who still lives in the area for potential re-interviews, and cross-referencing prior suspects' movements with federal travel databases unavailable in 2005. This list was submitted to the Cold Case Unit Supervisor for approval to proceed with in-depth analysis. After finalizing the assessment, Haley concluded that the Marco DeLuca file had strong potential for resolution through modern technology and met the criteria for official reopening under 2023 cold case procedures. Immediately after the file was approved for reopening, Haley transferred the most critical evidence, the silver necklace found in the parking lot in 2005, to the SJPD Forensic Lab for reanalysis using modern technology. The evidence was unsealed under strict protocol, its preservation condition re-verified, and handed over to the technician team handling AI-assisted fingerprint recovery. The first step was photographing the entire necklace surface at ultra-high resolution with a digital microscope, producing a set of detailed images many times superior to 2005 standards. From this image set, AI software scanned and analyzed every groove and microcurve on the metal surface, reconstructing the faint fingerprints previously deemed insufficient clarity nearly 2 decades earlier. The process took many hours, with the AI using machine learning algorithms to enhance contrast, calculate ridge direction, combine partial ridge segments, likely from the same print, and reconstruct complete fingerprint patterns. The final result yielded 2 fingerprints, sharp enough for database matching, one near the clasp and one on the right twisted face of the necklace. When run through the National Fingerprint Database, the system returned a clear match with over 99% accuracy, Andrew Cantera. His record appeared because he had submitted fingerprints during an Oregon driver's license procedure. This result was immediately logged in the forensic report, marking the first time in nearly 18 years that investigators identified direct physical evidence linking the evidence to a specific individual. Haley cross-verified the entire process to rule out technical errors, including chain of custody codes, preservation sequence, 2005 scene photos, and comparison with the original prints in the NGI system. Everything was fully consistent. After completing the fingerprint analysis, the forensic team moved to analyzing the soil, adhering to the necklace using modern micromineralogy and spectroscopy techniques unavailable in 2005. The soil sample was processed by separating grain layers, analyzing mineral composition, and comparing it to regional Northern California geological databases. The results showed characteristic proportions of olivine and serpentine, minerals commonly found at specific locations within the Santa Cruz Mountains range. To ensure accuracy, The analysis team cross-referenced the soil with detailed regional geological maps, ruling out areas with similar composition but mismatched terrain, such as quarries or construction sites. Notably, the soil did not match the native soil of Willow Glen or any urban area within city radius, indicating the necklace likely contacted a forested mountainous environment rather than falling where found. This reinforced the inference that the parking lot was only the drop location, not where Marco or the involved party had been earlier. The soil analysis was entered into the forensic report, with the assessment, soil sample likely originated from areas within Santa Cruz Mountains geological zone. Was a Tenterbels, the soil sample likely originated from areas within Santa Cruz Mountains geological zone. Haley recorded this in the new lead summary table, indicating the investigation needed to shift toward geologically matching areas. The dual breakthrough, identifying Andrew Cantera's fingerprint on the necklace and pinpointing a compatible geological origin for the adhering soil, created the first major advance in the case in nearly 2 decades. All post-internal verification forensic data was logged by Haley and added to the successfully re-evaluated evidence list, forming a new foundation for route inference and suspect involvement assessment. After completing evidence reanalysis and obtaining conclusions identifying Andrew Cantera's fingerprint and the soil's geological origin, Haley moved to the next key item on the forensic list: recovering images from the 2005 cameras. All of this footage was low resolution, noisy, and limited in dynamic range, preventing the original team from extracting useful identification information. With 2023 technology, Haley transferred the full dataset to an AI-enhanced video reconstruction system for processing. The software analyzed each frame, removed noise, boosted brightness, balanced color, and reconstructed motion shapes of subjects based on machine learning models trained on millions of pedestrian samples. Videos were processed in priority order, starting with the coffee shop camera, the only one capturing the figure walking behind Marco around 8:41 a.m. on August 12. When the AI system completed reconstruction, frame quality improved significantly. The figure behind Marco was no longer just a blurry shape, but began revealing basic clothing outlines, relative height, and movement patterns. Although the face remained unidentifiable due to the off angle and distance, the AI determined the subject wore a dark lightweight jacket with a small logo on the left chest. This logo had previously been completely invisible to the naked eye in the original video. Further enhancement of the chest area revealed a vertical triangular symbol with an extended faint text streak. Haley extracted the full frame sequence related to this logo and submitted it to a commercial symbol recognition system for cross-checking. The software matched it against thousands of business logos in the San Jose area from 2010. Within minutes, the system returned 3 possible matches, one of which belonged to Monterey Lodge Motel, a small lodging facility on Monterey Road, about a 10-plus minute drive from Willow Glen. Haley immediately checked the motel's records and noted that in the 2005 interview, Andrew had stated he was staying at a motel on Monterey Road around the time of Marco's disappearance, but could not provide a receipt. The logo match on the jacket made this location the first point to verify. Haley requested the motel owner to retrieve August 2005 lodging records. Since the business was still operating, the owner could access old paper storage, including handwritten logs, registration forms, and payment receipts. Among the surviving documents, a registration form dated August 11 listed Andrew C., with a signature partially matching Andrew's on his Oregon driver's license record. Though faded over time, the information was sufficient to confirm Andrew checked in on the 11th and checked out on the 12th of August, exactly during Marco's disappearance window. Additionally, records showed Andrew's late evening check-in on the 11th, aligning with the likely time frame the necklace contacted forest soil before ending up in the parking lot. Haley further checked the photocopy of the ID retained by the motel. Although blurred, it still showed the name and issuing state. The combination of the jacket logo matching the motel where Andrew stayed, the AI determined relative height and build roughly consistent with Andrew's description in records, and the timing made the connection between the suspect and the camera footage increasingly clear. Haley added, all results from the camera reanalysis to the forensic report, including enhanced frame sets, magnified logo images of the subject's jacket, logo match results, Monterey Lodge motel lodging documents, and height build comparison table. This marked a major step in establishing that the person walking behind Marco in the video was not merely an unidentified individual, but very likely Andrew Cantera, previously only a secondary person of interest, due to lack of physical evidence. The camera reanalysis officially elevated Andrew to a subject directly connected to Marco's final known movements on the morning of the disappearance. After obtaining new forensic evidence from the physical evidence and cameras, Haley moved on to the next task in the reevaluation plan, reconstructing Andrew Cantera's movement timeline from 2005 to 2023 to determine his behavioral pattern, places of residence, and possible presence in San Jose at the time Marco went missing. The first step in this process was to retrieve all of Andrew's financial data, including bank card transaction history, account activity, phone payment records, old ISP data if available, and any traces showing he had lived in various areas. Haley sent requests to the banks Andrew had previously used, while coordinating with federal agencies to access interstate transaction data from the years Andrew left California. The data showed that Andrew opened a small bank account in San Diego in 2004, then switched to using an account at an Oregon bank by late 2005, consistent with information that he left California shortly after Marco disappeared. From 2006 to 2010, the bank account recorded sporadic activity, mostly low-value transactions in Portland, Eugene, and a few small towns in Central Oregon, indicating an unstable lifestyle. Haley continued retrieving rental records, housing leases, and employment contracts from public databases in Oregon, Idaho, and Nevada, the three states where scattered data showed Andrew had appeared. Some lodging records showed Andrew had rented short-term rooms at 3 different motels in Oregon during 2007-2010. Another record proved he had worked temporary jobs at a machinery repair shop in Idaho in 2011. From 2012 to 2015, ISP data showed Andrew used prepaid internet services at 3 different addresses in Reno, Nevada, again following a pattern of short-term moves and no fixed residence. Based on all the financial and residency data sources, Haley began building a map of Andrew's movements over 18 years, marking each time point when he lived in or appeared in an area. This map showed that Andrew rarely stayed in one place for long, with each stay lasting from a few months to just over a year, but crucially, all his appearance locations formed a continuous timeline without major gaps, except during 2005, the period when Marco disappeared. This was the segment that required the most detailed analysis. Focusing on 2005, Haley compiled all available data from the California DMV, banks, medical records, motel receipts, and archived telecommunications data to determine where Andrew was in the period before and after August 12. Records from the Monterey Lodge motel confirmed Andrew stayed there from the evening of August 11 to the morning of August 12, 2005, exactly when Marco vanished. Haley further checked Andrew's card transactions that week and discovered a small transaction on August 10 at a convenience store about 4 miles from Willow Glen, showing Andrew had been in the San Jose area at least 2 days before the disappearance. In addition to financial data, Haley retrieved Andrew's 2005 mobile phone records through the old carrier. Although location data was not as precise as modern technology, tower connection logs showed Andrew used his phone in the coverage area of southern San Jose on the evening of August 11. This matched his check-in time at the motel on Monterey Road. ISP data was sparse, but it still recorded a public internet connection from a cafe on the same road on the morning of August 11. A sign Andrew was in the area right before the disappearance event. From this, Haley completed the first part of the timeline. Andrew was in San Diego early in 2005, arrived in San Jose in August, stayed at the Monterey Lodge motel on August 11, 12, and then left California by the end of the year. When extending the timeline to 2006-2010, Haley observed a major shift. Andrew virtually disappeared from California right after the incident, moving to Oregon and living scattered across many rural areas. This was flagged as a post-incident displacement pattern, a pattern of leaving the area immediately after a serious event, often seen in suspects trying to avoid detection. To finalize the timeline, Haley linked all the data along a time axis: 2004, early 2005 in San Diego, August 2005 in San Jose, late 2005 in Oregon, 2006-2010 scattered appearances in Oregon and Idaho, 2011-2015 in Nevada, and from 2016 to 2022. Mainly living in Portland. When all the data was connected, Haley had a clear picture. Andrew was definitively present in San Jose on the day Marco disappeared, corroborated by multiple independent sources, motel records, financial transactions, cell tower logs, and internet activity. This was the first time in the cold case file that investigators had a clear timeline proving Andrew's presence at the scene when Marco vanished, strongly reinforcing Andrew's role in the case, and providing a foundation to expand the next investigative steps. After completing Andrew's movement timeline and clearly establishing his presence in San Jose at the exact time Marco disappeared, Haley turned to examining an overlooked component from the original investigation: reports of suspicious vehicles in the Willow Glen area on the morning of August 12, 2005. In the old case file, a compiled vehicle list was created based on residential and commercial cameras at the time, notably including 3 dark-colored vehicles and 1 dark green Lexus that appeared between 8:40 and 8:55 a.m. on Pine Avenue, near the identified point where the K9 lost the trail. At the time, with no direct evidence linking the Lexus to Marco and no readable license plate from the blurry cameras, the investigation team could not pursue this lead further. Now, with 2023 technology and new datasets, Haley decided to review all dark green Lexus vehicles that could potentially match. The first step was requesting the DMV to retrieve all records of dark green Lexus vehicles registered or active in the San Jose area in August 2005, including those impounded, towed, or reported abandoned. From a list of over 60 vehicles, Haley narrowed the focus to those processed in 2005, 2006. One standout entry emerged: a dark green Lexus ES 300 impounded in Sacramento in November 2006, after being abandoned in a locked state with a broken ignition in an empty lot. The impound record noted that the license plates had been removed before discovery, and the previous owner never reclaimed it, so the vehicle was placed in the county's impounded vehicle storage. Haley immediately requested the impound yard to retrieve the vehicle for modern forensic examination. The Lexus was transferred to the lab and resealed per updated protocol before the doors were opened. The entire interior and trunk surfaces were scanned with blue light and luminol to detect contact traces. The results revealed several faint fingerprints along the interior door handles and dashboard area. These were photographed and submitted to the AI fingerprint restoration system. One partial fingerprint matched Andrew Cantera's fingerprint sample, exactly consistent with results obtained from the necklace, reinforcing Andrew's presence in the vehicle. Additionally, the forensic team found several small gray fabric fibers stuck in the rear seat creases. These were collected and sent for material analysis. The results identified the fibers as having a structure closely matching the cotton-polyester blend fabric commonly used in the shirt Marco was wearing on the day he disappeared, as described by Adrian in the original report. Although absolute confirmation that the fibers belonged to Marco was not possible, the material and color match significantly increased the likelihood that the victim had been in the vehicle or had contact with an object that had been inside it. During the trunk search, forensics discovered an old paper map of the Northern California region. The map had multiple creases, and in the southwestern area, within the Santa Cruz Mountains, a small red pencil circle with crosshatching was marked. The pencil mark had smudged over time, but was still identifiable for relative location. This item was seized as independent evidence and forwarded to the terrain analysis team to cross-reference with the soil composition results from the necklace. Haley noted a clear connection between this map and the soil analysis. The serpentine, olivine mineral region matched the marked area on the map. This indicated the Lexus had very likely been driven to the Santa Cruz Mountains around the time of Marco's disappearance. In addition, forensics detected slight disturbance marks on the trunk carpet, a depressed area matching the size and shape of a curled body or heavy object placed there briefly. Tiny soil particles in the trunk carpet were quickly analyzed via spectroscopy, yielding results consistent with the soil sample from the necklace, further supporting the hypothesis that the vehicle had direct contact with a mountainous forest environment before being abandoned and impounded. Haley compiled all the data, the matching fingerprints of Andrew on the door handles and dashboard, fibers closely consistent with Marco's shirt, the map marking the Santa Cruz Mountains location, and soil residue in the trunk matching the necklace sample. When cross-referenced with the timing data, Andrew present in San Jose on the day of the disappearance and leaving California shortly afterward, Haley concluded that the dark green Lexus ES300 was a vehicle highly likely used to transport the body or move the victim away from Willow Glen during Marco's disappearance. The matching traces across the necklace, cameras, timeline, and vehicle strengthened the connection between Andrew and the Lexus, while helping Haley complete a critical piece in the suspect's movement chain. Based on the soil composition analysis from the necklace and traces recovered from the Lexus ES300, Haley and the SJPD terrain investigation team began narrowing down high-probability areas in the Santa Cruz Mountains for a large-scale search. Two key data sources, the matching soil sample and the pencil-marked map in the trunk, both pointed to an area in the northeastern part of the range where the geology features characteristic olivine and serpentine strata. To refine the scope, Haley combined geological maps with drivable access routes from 2005 and identified a roughly 4 square kilometers area between trails near Bear Creek Road and Summit Road. This was a location with many unofficial pullouts, open patches used by locals for temporary camping, and several discrete spots where a car could stop without drawing attention. After defining the priority zone, Haley mobilized an engineering team using GPR and LiDAR scanning equipment to detect signs of soil disturbance, potential indicators of a temporary burial site. The GPR team divided the area into survey grids, moving in parallel lines and recording anomalous signals in the shallow soil layers, where radar returns indicated previously overturned earth. LiDAR scanned broader surfaces to identify subtle depressions or terrain changes invisible to the naked eye. After nearly a day of scanning, the technical data revealed 3 suspicious locations, one of which, deep in a narrow strip between 2 slopes, showed a stronger GPR response consistent with the size of a small refilled burial pit. Haley decided to prioritize this spot. An excavation team was deployed immediately afterward, using careful tools to avoid disturbing evidence. After removing about 15 centimeters of leaf litter and topsoil, an area with distinct color and structure appeared, showing signs of prior digging and refilling. Digging deeper to about 40 centimeters, the team uncovered a dark decomposed fabric fragment, followed by several small fragmented bones. By late afternoon, they located arm bones and a skull in a state of decomposition consistent with over 18 years. The entire area was cordoned off, and bone recovery proceeded under strict forensic protocol. Each bone fragment, soil sample, and on-site item was numbered, photographed, and placed in specialized bags. Few personal items remained due to long-term decomposition, but the skeletal structure and location fit a temporary burial scenario. The remains were immediately transferred to the Santa Clara County Forensic Lab for DNA identification. DNA samples were compared to reference DNA from Marco's relatives, and the results later confirmed a full match. The recovered skeleton was Marco DeLuca. With identity confirmed, the forensic lab proceeded to assess the cause of death. Although most soft tissue had decomposed, the skull showed a fracture running along the temporal region, indicative of heavy blunt force from a hard object. Some rib bones exhibited damage, but due to possible natural decomposition and animal scavenging interference, forensics could only conclusively determine that Marco suffered a severe blow to the head prior to death. No clear defensive-type fractures were found on the hands, but the skull injury characteristics indicated this was not an accident. All findings were incorporated into the forensic report, including discovery location, decomposition level, bone trauma, and a conclusion that the cause of death was most likely blunt force trauma leading to cranial injury. The discovery of the remains and identity confirmation eliminated any possibility that Marco was still alive or had left voluntarily, while strongly reinforcing the hypothesis that the victim was attacked and transported by vehicle before being buried in the Santa Cruz Mountains. After the remains were identified and the forensic report confirmed Marco DeLuca's death by external force, Haley transferred the entire new forensic file to the SJPD Fugitive Apprehension Unit, while simultaneously sending federal notification to the FBI to expand tracking of Andrew Cantera. Data collected from the 18-year timeline showed Andrew left Oregon in early 2023, briefly staying at a short-term address in the Salem suburbs before suddenly vanishing from the area. Haley requested the latest card transactions and discovered a small ATM withdrawal in Northern California, less than 40 miles from the Oregon border. Using this data, SJPD coordinated with the FBI to review traffic cameras along I-5 and CA-99 to determine direction of travel. A freeway camera near Red Bluff captured a man with a build and gait matching Andrew's description stepping off a long-distance bus, carrying an old backpack and wearing a hat that obscured most of his face. Although the quality was insufficient for facial recognition, body shape comparison software using AI-restored data from 2005 video showed a high match level. From Red Bluff, the FBI continued reviewing freeway cameras over the next 48 hours and detected the same individual at a rest stop on CA-99, heading toward Sacramento. This matched a transaction at an automated vending machine in the area using cash, but interior camera footage showed a faint tattoo on the left neck. A detail in Andrew's identification file from his 2014 Reno motel registration, combining the two pieces of data, direction of travel and cash-only behavior, to avoid leaving traces. The FBI concluded Andrew was moving on an unpredictable route, but with a likely final destination of Sacramento, where numerous bus lines and transfer hubs facilitate quick interstate movement. SJPD immediately deployed a joint federal-state team split into two prongs, one group sweeping cheap motels along the Stockton Boulevard and Franklin Boulevard corridors where people without fixed addresses often stay. The other checking Greyhound and Megabus terminals by matching body profiles to AI-derived data. Within 72 hours, the investigation team found a matching pattern at the Sacramento Greyhound station. Cameras recorded a man with an old backpack entering the restroom area, with a build similar to Andrew, and wearing a low-pulled hat obscuring his face. Although no card transaction occurred, exterior cameras captured the hat's distinctive frayed edge matching features noted at the Red Bluff rest stop. Once the internal alert was sent to the FBI, the technical surveillance unit used automated behavior analysis to sketch the suspect's likely next movements based on his 18-year pattern, short-term stays, sudden relocation after camera exposure, preference for public transportation, and selection of low surveillance areas. This model identified 3 potential areas the suspect might head to after appearing at the Sacramento station: lodging near Broadway, the West Sacramento area along federal bus routes, or a cheap motel on Northgate Boulevard, a location with a history of attracting transients and day laborers renting nightly. Based on this analysis, the FBI and SJPD established a 3-mile surveillance radius around the Sacramento station, deploying plainclothes officers at key transit points and requiring bus terminals to provide immediate alerts if a man matching the description appeared. In parallel, the apprehension team collected camera footage from convenience stores and gas stations within walking distance from the station, searching for signs of the face, tattoo, or gait. One gas station camera on Broadway recorded a similar-looking man entering to buy coffee, and security microphone voice analysis showed a low, slightly hoarse tone, consistent with Andrew's voice in the 2005 interview recording. Haley immediately requested escalation to active pursuit status and activation of the arrest plan. The FBI assisted in positioning containment forces on 4 exit routes from the area, with 2 tactical teams placed on standby for approach. When camera data showed Andrew leaving the gas station and heading toward a string of motels on Broadway, an area consistent with his 18-year residency pattern, SJPD issued a forced entry warrant based on high probability of the suspect's involvement in Marco DeLuca's homicide, while preparing armed tactical options due to Andrew being assessed as potentially resistant or likely to flee across state lines. Locating Andrew within a tight radius marked the transition from investigation to apprehension, and a coordinated SJPD FBI operation was officially established to bring the suspect into custody. When the surveillance system confirmed that Andrew had entered the area of the motels on Broadway, the joint SJPD FBI task force immediately deployed the SWAT team to approach in a ready-to-arrest posture. A plainclothes surveillance unit monitored from a distance, observing Andrew walk into the rear courtyard of a low-budget motel, carrying a backpack and deliberately avoiding areas with cameras, consistent with the stealth movement pattern documented in his 18-year file. When Andrew unlocked room number 14 with a temporary key, the signal was relayed to the command team and the arrest operation was activated. SWAT formed up and advanced silently, with 2 operatives cutting off the rear escape route, while another group closed in on the front door. After a brief announcement of the arrest warrant over a bullhorn received no response from inside, the SWAT team used specialized breaching equipment, stormed the room, and subdued Andrew in under 10 seconds. The suspect was handcuffed on the spot. He was unarmed, but attempted to conceal a phone under the mattress, an action noted in the report as an effort to destroy evidence. Andrew remained silent and did not resist, but investigators recorded signs of psychological stress characteristic of a suspect fully aware of the reason for the arrest: avoidance of eye contact and slight trembling in the wrists. Once the room was secured, the crime scene examination team entered to conduct the search. In Andrew's backpack, police recovered several items: an old folding knife, a newer map of Northern California, more recent than the one found in the Lexus, featuring numerous handwritten markings similar in style to those on the 2005 map, a cloth with a few light-colored fibers attached, a small notebook containing scattered notes of dates and travel locations over many years. Additionally, in the motel room's trash bin, the search team found a printed scrap of paper with a Wi-Fi address from a coffee shop in Portland, matching the ISP data Haley had previously retrieved, further strengthening the suspect's timeline chain. These items were sealed according to procedure and immediately transferred to the forensics lab for analysis of their connection to the case. At the same time, the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office began compiling all the forensic evidence Haley had gathered: AI recovered fingerprint on the necklace, soil match linking to the Santa Cruz Mountains, analysis of the map from the Lexus trunk, enhanced resolution camera footage, lodging records from Monterey Lodge Motel in 2005, cell tower logs, financial transactions from August 10th, and confirmation of Andrew's presence in San Jose on the exact day Marco disappeared. Furthermore, the medical examiner's report on Marco's cause of death, traumatic brain injury due to blunt force trauma, became a central element of the charging document. The prosecutor organized the entire sequence chronologically. Marco left home on the morning of August 12, 2005. The suspect was captured on camera following the victim along the expected route. Marco's necklace was dropped in the parking lot at the same time the suspect appeared. The green Lexus was used to travel to the Santa Cruz Mountains. Soil match clues and marked map locations aligned with the recovery site of the remains. The suspect left California immediately after the incident and lived a transient life for 18 years to evade detection. When this complete timeline was connected with modern forensic evidence, a tight chain of linkage emerged, clearly depicting the abduction, transport, and murder of the victim. Based on the full structure of evidence, the Santa Clara County District Attorney formally filed charges against Andrew Cantera for 2 serious felonies, kidnapping and murder in the first degree, with aggravating factors including intent to kill, transportation of the victim by motor vehicle, and attempt to conceal the body. When Andrew was transferred to county jail, the charging document was filed with the court, and the Marco DeLuca case, after nearly 2 decades as a cold case, officially entered the criminal prosecution phase. Andrew Cantera's trial took place nearly a year after his arrest. Attended by representatives from the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office, the Cold Case Unit investigative team, forensic experts who participated in reanalysis of evidence, and the victim's family. Throughout the trial, the prosecution presented the entire chain of evidence previously admitted by the court. Andrew's fingerprint on Marco's necklace recovered through AI-enhanced fingerprint reconstruction. Soil composition perfectly matching samples from the Lexus trunk mat and the excavation site in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Restored camera frames showing an individual with matching characteristics following Marco on the morning of the disappearance. The map with burial site markings found in the Lexus trunk, abandoned in Sacramento, cell tower logs, and financial transactions, confirming Andrew's presence in San Jose on the day of the incident. And finally, the forensic conclusion on Marco's cause of death, traumatic brain injury from blunt force trauma. In addition, the prosecution presented Andrew's 18-year movement timeline, demonstrating an unstable lifestyle of constant relocation across multiple states to avoid leaving traces, clearly indicating evasion of investigation. Andrew's defense attorney attempted to argue that the forensic evidence was only circumstantial, did not prove Andrew's presence at the time of the victim's death, and that the fingerprint on the necklace could have originated from an earlier encounter at a 2004 exhibition. However, the prosecution countered by pointing out that the fingerprint position on the necklace was in a location unlikely to occur, incidentally, consistent with the grip pattern when pulling an object from a victim's neck, and that soil particles on the necklace came from an area Marco had never visited, but perfectly matched the remains recovery site. Furthermore, fiber evidence from the Lexus and the timing alignment between freeway camera captures undermined the defense's argument. When forensic experts were called, they confirmed that the AI process used complied with federal standards and had no possibility of error or fabrication. The convergence of fingerprint and soil composition matches from 3 independent sources was considered especially powerful in establishing a direct link between suspect, evidence, burial site. After 3 weeks of testimony and 2 days of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous and uncontested verdict. Andrew Cantera was guilty of kidnapping and murder in the first degree, with intentional, premeditated conduct and aggravating factors, including transportation of the victim by motor vehicle and deliberate concealment of the body in a mountainous forest area. At sentencing, the judge announced the penalty life imprisonment without parole, based on the severity of the crime and the prolonged nature of the conduct to conceal the offense. Andrew was immediately transferred to a high-security correctional facility per California state regulations, concluding the criminal accountability process nearly 2 decades after Marco's disappearance. Following the verdict, the Cold Case Unit updated the file per closure protocol. Case file #058,074 was marked as solved, closed. All evidence was placed in long-term forensic storage for future reference, and the comprehensive investigative summary was archived in the internal records system for permanent retention. As is customary for cases resolved through modern technology, Haley and the forensic team prepared an in-depth report detailing the reanalysis of the necklace, AI camera restoration, and soil composition cross-referencing to be incorporated into the updated training curriculum for new SJPD investigators. Lessons from the case, particularly the importance of long-term evidence preservation, the power of modern technology to reconstruct seemingly useless data, and the value of multi-source forensic integration, were incorporated into the following year's Cold Case Training Initiative curriculum. Upon official case closure, SJPD released a comprehensive conclusion report, noting that the Marco DeLuca case stands as a textbook example of the importance of preserving records and evidence and expanding federal cooperation. After nearly 20 years, the mysterious disappearance in Willow Glen found resolution and became one of the clearest demonstrations that modern forensic technology can bring closure to cases once thought unsolvable forever. The story of Marco DeLuca's disappearance and murder, though it occurred in 2005, still clearly reflects issues American society faces today. The importance of data, technology, community vigilance, and not ignoring small signals that could save a life. Marco vanishing in just a few minutes in the Willow Glen neighborhood, a place generally regarded as safe and peaceful, serves as a reminder that even the best communities can harbor risks we often overlook. In this story, details such as Marco walking as part of his routine, not carrying any tracking device, and relying solely on a familiar route, highlight the vulnerability of individuals without minimal self-protection measures. In the United States today, with high rates of adult missing persons cases, sharing itineraries with loved ones, using personal safety apps, or always carrying a GPS-enabled device is no longer overly cautious. It is an essential part of personal responsibility for safety. The biggest lesson comes from the investigation. Evidence once thought useless, blurry cameras, unclear fingerprints, tiny soil samples invisible to the naked eye, all became pivotal when 2023 forensic technology became powerful enough. This is a reminder to the community, and especially to victims or victims' families, that justice may not arrive immediately, but persistence and faith in scientific progress can transform a seemingly hopeless case. Another lesson comes from Andrew Quintera's behavior. Constant movement, cash-only transactions, and camera avoidance showed evasion patterns that went unnoticed before. Today, when citizens can record any time with phones, communities must pay attention to unusual behavior, not to judge, but to protect one another. Marco's story reminds us that justice can arrive very late, but if society stands together, police remain persistent, and technology advances, no perpetrator can hide forever, and no victim will be forgotten. If you want to continue following cold cases solved after many years, thanks to technology and investigative perseverance, like Marco DeLuca's case, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. Thank you for joining. See you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring mysteries brought to light.